Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. Pain. The stinging pain of inhaling cold air, accompanied by the violent pounding of my heart, felt like my chest was being torn apart. Kainyi walked barefoot through the snow-covered, withered forest, her feet already bleeding profusely, but she felt no pain whatsoever. Fear, like a giant hand, gripped her throat, driving her to run tirelessly forward. Inosuke, nestled in her arms, struggled to open his eyes, only to be met with a blur of swaying, dark shadows of trees. Time travel. Moreover, they traveled to the worst possible point in time. As a transmigrator familiar with the plot, Inosuke instantly understood his current predicament. This was the night the mother died in the original story. Kotoha escaped the Eternal Bliss cult. More importantly, she saw Doma, the cult leader who was regarded as a living bodhisattva, devouring the corpses of his followers with relish in the main hall. Her faith crumbled, her lies exposed. She was fleeing from that evil spirit in human skin who had been unusually kind to her. Kotoha-chan. A sweet, gentle voice, tinged with a hint of helpless sigh, rang out behind me like a leech. Why did you run away? Everyone was having a great time chatting just now. Qin Yi's body stiffened, her legs gave way, and she finally reached the end of the run. Ahead lies a cliff, beneath your feet a raging torrent. There is no road. Kotoha turned around in despair, leaning against the cliff, tightly protecting Inosuke in her arms. Doma strolled out from the shadows of the woods. He still maintained his compassionate demeanor, gently waving a golden iron fan in his hand, but the smile on his lips appeared particularly eerie in the moonlight. Although it was no different from the usual pampering. I clearly like you so much. Tongmo tilted his head, a hint of confusion and bewilderment showing in his seven-colored, glass-like eyes. Because Kotoha-chan sings well and is so innocent, I originally planned to let you live to a ripe old age. But why do you want to see me eating? Seeing it is one thing, but why look at it like it's a monster? Can't you accept the real me? Doma sighed, abruptly closed his fan, pointed it at the koto leaf, and his tone became cold and ruthless. Since you're unwilling to accept my redemption, and unwilling to stay by my side, then there's nothing I can do. Kainyi's body trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes. As a mother, she wasn't afraid of death, but she couldn't let Inosuke die. She glanced at the bottomless cliff. Throw it into the river, and perhaps there's still a glimmer of hope. If I were captured by Doma, I might truly be reduced to ashes. She suddenly lifted the swaddled baby, as if to throw it. Inosuke's suicide pact, the Great War. Don't throw it away. According to the original story, although he would survive being thrown, he would be reborn as a wild boar's child, and his mother would be eaten by Doma. We must save ourselves. We must immediately change this mindset. Just then, a cold, mechanical voice exploded in his mind. Ding! God-level villain development system activated. Current situation, Doma, whose identity has been exposed, has decided to kill. Please make a choice, host. Option A, obey the original story, be thrown off a cliff, mother dies, reward, beast instinct. Option B, recognize the thief as your father, exploit Doma's psychological weaknesses to make him believe you are of the same kind. Reward, ice spirit physique. Without the slightest hesitation. Only if Doma believes that we are not running away out of fear can we survive. So, we must acknowledge him, even worship him. The instant Kotoha let go, Inosuke burst into a startling cry. But the crying wasn't out of fear, rather, it carried a sense of grievance, as if the person had seen a loved one. With all his might, he managed to free his two little hands from his swaddling clothes, not reaching for his mother, but straight towards the boy opposite him. Papa, give me a big hug. Qin Ye froze, her hands pausing in shock. Doma was also stunned. He looked at the baby hanging over the edge of the cliff, half of its body outside. The baby was struggling to stretch its body out, its large, emerald green eyes showing no fear, but instead reflecting Doma's pale, blood-stained face. Inosuke stared intently at Doma. It was that face, that cannibalistic face. But he had to show that I wasn't afraid of that face. In fact, I like this face. Inosuke's lips curled up into a toothless, extremely bright smile. He waved his little hands, as if asking for a hug. Then, that earth-shattering address rang out. Dad. The wind has stopped. Only the hum of the water below the cliff could be heard. Kainyi's mind went blank. For the first time, Doma's emotionless eyes flickered violently. Dad. Doma pointed to himself, his tone filled with disbelief. Is he calling me? Inosuke didn't give the two time to think. Taking advantage of Kainyi's dazed state, he suddenly kicked his leg, causing the swaddled baby to slip from Kainyi's arms. But instead of falling off the cliff, he used the momentum to lunge at Doma. This is a high-stakes gamble, betting that Upper Moon 2 will catch him. Doma instinctively reached out, and what he touched was a soft, warm mass. Inosuke landed precisely in Doma's arms, his little hands gripping Doma's shirt tightly, his drool-covered face pressed against Doma's cold clothes. There were still traces of blood on it. Inosuke didn't mind at all, instead, he rubbed against it and let out a satisfied laugh. Look! Doma looked down at the soft, warm Inosuke in his arms. The baby, nestled against the chest of the man who had just eaten, didn't cry or scream, instead, he smiled so happily. He even calls him Dad. An unprecedented and eerie sense of satisfaction filled Doma's empty heart. Kotoha-chan. Doma raised his head, his eyes filled with a fanatical excitement. You've got one thing wrong. You thought I was a monster, so you ran away with the child, but look, this child knows I am a god. He didn't perceive what you just saw as something terrifying, he accepted everything about me. He even felt that this was exactly how a father should be. Doma laughed, but the laugh was no longer a mere mask, rather, it was a kind of pleasure that emerged from the closed loop of morbid logic. Since this child recognized me as his father, why did you run away? We are clearly a loving family. He walked up to Qin Yat, extending a hand from above, no longer in the gesture of waving a fan, but in an invitation. Get up, Kainyi. I forgive you, for the sake of the child's intelligence. After all, you, who gave birth to such a child, are a very precious treasure. Inosuke felt a chill surge through his body, it was the ice spirit physique reward from the system taking effect. He no longer felt that Doma's embrace was as cold as an ice cellar, instead, it felt like hugging an air conditioner in the summer. He yawned contentedly, grabbed a strand of Doma's hair with his little hand, and closed his eyes. Acting should be done in its entirety. The way she felt so safe in her father's arms completely shattered Doma's last remaining doubts. So cute. It looks a lot like Kotoha-chan. Doma looked at the sleeping baby in his arms, then turned and walked towards the direction of the blissful sect. Let's go, Kainyi. Going home. Kainyi watched that retreating figure, then looked at her unharmed son. Though fear remained, she knew. They survived. Chapter 2. The wind and snow gradually stopped. On the way back to the Eternal Bliss sect, the atmosphere was so oppressive it was suffocating. Kainyi hugged herself, her body stiff yet trembling uncontrollably. She followed closely behind Doma. Her heart pounded wildly, every step felt like a journey to her death. She had just witnessed the man eating people, and then she witnessed him turn into a demon and follow her. But now, he's taking them back as if nothing happened? Hey, Kotoha-chan! Doma, who was walking ahead, suddenly stopped and turned around. The blood on his face had been wiped away, and his eyes, like seven-colored glass, now revealed an expression that could even be described as aggrieved. I'm really heartbroken. In this cult of bliss, you're clearly my favorite. Qin Yi's pupils trembled, and she opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Doma walked up to Kotoha, extended his cool, slender fingers, and gently smoothed her disheveled hair with an incredibly gentle touch. Only you, Kotoha-chan, are different. You sing so beautifully, and you're so innocent, your mind is empty, you don't have any bad thoughts. I feel very relaxed when I'm with you. I originally planned to take care of you until you died of old age. Maybe I really like you. At this point, Doma's eyes suddenly darkened, though a smile remained on his lips, but the surrounding temperature instantly plummeted to freezing. But why did you see things you shouldn't have? And why did you run away? I showed it to you on purpose. Why can't you accept all of me? I saw all of it, yet I couldn't accept it. I can't accept it. You must belong to me forever. Even if you become one with me, even if you can never sing again. Having not experienced Qin Yi's death, he did not understand love in its true sense, he only understood ownership. Pfft! Inosuke, nestled in Doma's arms, suddenly reached out his little hand and slapped Doma's hand, which was stroking Koto's hair. It's like a possessive little cub, protecting its possessions. Doma paused for a moment, then looked down at Inosuke. It stared with its big, round eyes, blew a bubble from its mouth, pressed its face against Doma's cold hand, and tried to warm Doma's fingers with its two warm little hands. Dad, it's cold. Inosuke mumbled something indistinctly. Doma's fingertips, which were already covered in frost, trembled slightly. He looked at Inosuke, who was trying to warm his hands, and then at Kotoha, who, despite her fear, was still tightly protecting the child. An unprecedented sense of script formation took shape in his otherwise empty mind. It used to be a pet canary, but now it seems like it's become a family of 3? Oops! Is this child worried that my hands are cold? He took Inosuke's small hand in his own, his eyes crinkling with a smile. Kotoha-chan, look how sensible this child is. Tears welled up in Qin Yi's eyes, and she nodded frantically, still not understanding what was going on. Yes, yes. Inosuke really likes the leader. Us. Let's raise him together. Since that's the case. Doma seems to have made a decision. He leaned closer to Qin Yi and gently placed a cold kiss on her forehead. Then I'll forgive you this time. Forget what you just saw. As long as you sing obediently and raise our good son well, we can still live happily together. Half an hour later. The inner temple of the Eternal Bliss sect. When Doma returned with Kotoha and Inosuke, the believers weren't too surprised, because their leader often brought back pitiful people. But this time, the cult leader's attitude was completely different. Listen up, everyone. Doma stood on the high platform, holding Inosuke with extreme elegance, even wrapping Inosuke's small body in his cloak, looking every bit the loving father. Qin Yi was seated on a soft couch beside him, a position higher than that of all the followers. This Lady Qin Yi, her singing can soothe the soul, is the most precious saint of our religion. The voice of the Doma echoed within the main hall, sacred and solemn. And this child? He lifted Inosuke up, facing the kneeling believers. Inosuke cooperated fully. He knew that this was not only to save face for Doma, but also to establish his and his mother's place in this hellish place. So, he faced the crowd without any stage fright. Instead, he waved his chubby little hands and giggled. His innocent and naive appearance was like a ray of holy light in the eerie bliss cult. This child and I are destined to be together. Looking at Inosuke's energetic demeanor, Doma's eyes revealed a hint of genuine affection in front of the cult members. It seems to be the kind of affection one has for their own biological son. He will be my adopted son, raised in this blissful religion. His name is Inosuke. From now on, seeing him is like seeing me. The believers below the platform bowed in utmost reverence. Greetings, young lord. Praise be to the Lord of Mercy. Amidst the deafening chants of worship, Inosuke leaned against Doma's cold embrace, looking at his mother beside him, still shaken but unharmed, and breathed a sigh of relief. Ding! God-level villain development system activated. Current situation, the young master's first meeting. Reward, perfect pitch, which Doma loves to hear even when his mother sings wrong. A system notification sounded softly, informing him that he had inherited and enhanced his perfect pitch talent from his mother. Doma lowered his head, poked Inosuke's cheek with his finger, and chuckled softly, "Little Inosuke, from now on, you must work with mommy to please daddy, okay?" Inosuke grabbed his finger, smiling innocently. "Of course, I will try my best to please you." Chapter 3. The morning of the Eternal Bliss Sect. Kotoha knelt on the tatami mat, holding a rattle drum, trying to cheer Inosuke up. But her gaze kept drifting towards the corner of the room. Sitting there was the owner of this house, Upper Moon 2, Doma. Doma was polishing his fan, the golden fan surface was as sharp as a knife, reflecting a terrifying light. "Kotoha-chan, stop shaking that rattle." Tongmo didn't even look up, his tone light and cheerful. "Sing Pinky Promise again, it's my favorite song of yours, and I think Inosuke loves it too." Qin Yi's hand froze, a large blush suddenly spreading across her face, and the rattle drum fell to the ground. "Tanuki-san, Tanuki-san." She sang the wrong song again. "Inosuke, come here." Doma waved, as if calling to his own son. Inosuke was currently lying on the tatami mat, working out his core strength. Hearing the sound, he cursed inwardly for all the trouble, but on the surface, he immediately put on a bright smile and crawled towards the Domo on all fours. Reaching Doma's feet, Inosuke, without any hesitation, grabbed Doma's trouser leg like a kitten and started climbing up. The movements were so practiced it was heartbreaking. With a smile, Doma lifted him up with one hand and placed him on his lap. "Come here, Daddy has something good to show you." Tongmo flicked his wrist. Swish! The golden fan suddenly unfurled, unleashing a sharp gust of wind that slashed directly at Inosuke's face, coming within 0.01 centimeters of his nose. A few strands of the baby's already sparse lanugo, shaved off by the baby's hair, drifted gently down. Qin Ye covered her mouth, almost screaming, tears welling up instantly. This wasn't teasing a child, this was clearly playing with fire. However, Inosuke didn't even blink. Based on his understanding of Doma, he could sense that although the attack was dangerous, it did not contain any real killing intent. Doma has extremely strong self-control, this is simply showing off. What are you pretending for? Old deng. Oh. Doma looked at Inosuke, whose expression remained unchanged, a hint of amusement flashing in his eyes. Aren't you afraid? This thing can slice a person's head off like tofu. Inosuke stared intently at the fan. Although it was adorned with exquisite lotus patterns, it exuded a faint smell of blood and a chilling aura. For him, who possessed an ice spirit constitution, the fan was cool and comfortable. Like a popsicle in summer. And so, to Doma's astonishment, Inosuke stretched out his chubby little hand. Instead of grabbing the sharp edge of the fan, he precisely grasped the end of the fan handle. Iya! Inosuke tugged hard at the fan pendant. What do you want? Doma released his grip. The heavy fan pressed down on Inosuke's small hands instantly. An ordinary baby would have been unable to hold it and it would have fallen to their foot, but Inosuke was naturally strong and managed to hold onto the fan, which was bigger than his face, with both hands. Then, he did something that Doma didn't expect. Inosuke, mimicking Doma's earlier actions, laboriously waved his fan. Although his movements were clumsy and he was just waving his arms around haphazardly, he perfectly imitated the air of someone who was determined to chop something down. Whoosh! The fan, making a faint gust of wind, struck Doma's chest. The hall was deathly silent, Qin Ye was so frightened she dared not breathe. Doma looked down at the fan on his chest, then at Inosuke, whose serious expression seemed to say, "I can do that too." A moment later, he burst into extremely joyful laughter. "Ha ha ha ha! Good! Like me! Like me!" Doma snatched the fan away and gently closed it, then affectionately patted Inosuke's head. He adored the boy now. "See that? Kotoha." Doma pointed at Inosuke, his eyes burning with fervor. He wasn't playing with the fan pendant or biting the fan ribs, instead, he was imitating my movements. He was learning how to use a weapon. "How old is it?" "Just a few months. And it already has the instinct to hunt." Doma lifted Inosuke high and kissed his rosy cheeks. "Marvelous." Inosuke rolled his eyes inwardly. He just wanted to test how heavy the fan was and whether he could sell it for money, who wanted to learn how to kill someone. However, seeing how happy Doma was. "Never mind. My dad is mentally unstable. Let's go." Doma was in a great mood. He tucked Inosuke under his arm and stood up. "There's a morning meeting at church today. I'll take you to meet those fools who worship you like a god." Kainyi quickly got up, wanting to take the child. "My lord, let me carry you." "No need, you should rest first, Kotoha-chan. You ran so far last night, you must be very tired." As his father, I should be holding this child now. He was still resentful about Kotoha seeing him eat people and then running away. Inosuke was very uncomfortable being squeezed, but he didn't complain. Through Doma's arms, he looked at his trembling mother behind him, and quietly stretched out his small hand, waving it at Kotoha. It was as if he were saying, "Mom, don't be afraid, I'll protect you." In the main hall of the blissful religion, hundreds of believers knelt on the ground, surrounded by the smoke of incense. Doma sat on his lotus throne and casually placed Inosuke on his lap. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have some worries today." Below the stage, a believer who appeared to be a wealthy businessman trembled as he raised his head. "The Master's troubles are our sins. Please enlighten us, Master." "Oh, it's really nothing." Doma, fanning himself, casually pointed to Inosuke beside him, who was staring at the apples on the offering table, drooling. "My child is growing. But how can ordinary, mundane things be worthy of him? He is the Son of God." The believers instantly understood and shouted in unison. "My family has 1,000-year-old ginseng. I have deep-sea pearl powder. I am willing to offer all my wealth to repair the palace for the young master. I have a daughter and a son. Let the young master choose a few to take." Inosuke was stunned by the sight of this group of crazed people. Is this the true value of a cult? If this could be converted into cash, I could be the richest person in the world even if I didn't become a Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Doma turned his head to look at Inosuke, whose eyes were shining, and chuckled softly. "Look, Inosuke, this is what humans are like. Weakness, folly, blindness. If you give them even the slightest glimmer of hope, they will give you everything. Did you learn it? This is a game even more fun than killing people. Salvation for all living beings." Inosuke listened to the devil's whispers without feeling a ripple in his heart. All he knew was that he might as well take advantage of the good stuff these people brought. He reached out, grabbed a large apple from the offering table, and smashed it hard onto the ground. Click! The crisp sound echoed in the main hall. Chapter 4. The Inner Temple of the Eternal Bliss Sect. The night was deep, but not peaceful. The air here seemed to freeze, and enormous ice lotuses were placed all around, emanating a white, chilling aura. If an ordinary person stayed here for even a moment, their lungs would probably be frostbitten by the sub-zero temperatures. Qinya was wrapped in a thick fox fur coat. Even though she didn't feel cold, Upper Moon too still wrapped her up without asking. "You look good in it. Don't let it freeze," Doma firmly said. Doma toyed with the pair of fine gold fans in his hands, but his gaze was fixed on the base beside him. There, Inosuke lay sprawled on the hard, cold ice. He was sleeping soundly, with a trace of drool still hanging from the corner of his mouth. For him, who possessed an ice spirit constitution, the blissful sect, which could freeze people to death, was as comfortable as a cool mat on a hot summer day. That's so unfair. Doma turned his head to the side, his gaze shifting back and forth between Kotoha and the fast-sleeping Inosuke. A playful smile curled at the corner of his lips. He extended his pale finger, and a tiny ice butterfly materialized at the tip, gently landing on Inosuke's nose. The icy touch didn't wake Inosuke, instead, the ticklish sensation from the fluttering wings of the ice butterfly made him frown. Inosuke waved his little hand impatiently, shattering the ice butterfly, and groggily opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Doma's face, which looked particularly eerie in the moonlight, and a surge of morning grumpiness immediately welled up inside him. "You're awake? Perfect timing, the moonlight is lovely tonight. Daddy will teach you something new." Doma sat up straight and cleared his throat. In an instant, his demeanor changed. No longer with his usual frivolous laugh, he lowered his voice, his chest vibrating slightly. It emitted an extremely peculiar sound, seemingly capable of penetrating the eardrums and reaching the soul. Eternal bliss. These four simple words, uttered by him, possessed a captivating, almost magical power. Inosuke felt like he needed to pee. It was a unique, resonant sound, the voice of a charlatan who had deceived countless believers for 200 years, making them willingly offer up their flesh and blood. Kaine's eyes in the corner suddenly became somewhat dazed. It felt like being trapped in an illusion. Ding! God-level villain development system activated. Current situation, Doma's teachings through words and deeds. Please make a choice, host. Option A, obey the original story and become a mute beauty, reward, wild boar headgear. Option B, recognize the thief as your father. Learn from your father's teachings. Reward, increased lung capacity. B, definitely B. I didn't have a choice back then, a nicer voice would definitely be better. The moment he heard the sound, the system panel in his mind flickered slightly, and the perfect pitch skill, inherited from his mother and enhanced, was automatically activated. In Inosuke's ears, Doma's voice was no longer a mysterious and unpredictable divine pronouncement that made him want to urinate. It was instantly broken down into a series of waveforms that only it could understand. He could even clearly distinguish how Doma's larynx contracted and how the airflow moved between his vocal cords when he sang. I see. Is this guy's brainwashing trick? Come on, Inosuke, say it out loud. Doma looked at him expectantly, his eyes gleaming with an unusual light. Once you learn this voice, those foolish believers will obediently listen to you and dedicate everything to you. Maybe Dad will listen to you in the future. Inosuke rolled over and sat cross-legged on the ice seat. Although he had no interest in being a charlatan, mastering such tricks was clearly necessary if he wanted to thrive in this cutthroat world. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving, trying to control his immature vocal cords to replicate. Doma stared at him with great interest, waiting for the baby to utter its first babbling sounds. However, the next second, the sound that came from Inosuke's mouth made Doma's pupils contract sharply. Hungry. Although the words were altered. But the texture of the sound, the ethereal and sacred rhythm, and the soul-stirring vibration frequency were exactly the same as what Doma had just said. The innocent voices of children echoed in the main hall. Clang! The hand warmer in Qin Yi's hand fell to the ground in the corner. She stared at her son in shock. For a fleeting moment, she had a strange feeling. Inosuke is not an infant, but a miniature god. Perfect. Perfect. Kotoha-chan, you're amazing. What kind of genius did you give birth to? Is this child really not my biological child? Doma muttered to himself, forgetting to even wave the fan in his hand. The excitement in his eyes was almost overflowing, as if he were admiring a rare treasure. It's not just imitation, the pitch, the breath control, it's practically me. It took me 10 years to figure this out, and you think you can learn it after listening to it once? Doma suddenly lifted Inosuke above his head, his smile twisted and fanatical. Genius! No, you're a monster born to rule humanity. Inosuke, you are my child. Inosuke stared blankly at the wildly excited Doma, feeling nothing at all, and even wanted to roll his eyes. What's so difficult about that? With this accessory on my person, this little thing is a piece of cake. Now that you understand I'm hungry, why don't you hurry up and serve the food? Just then, a servant's trembling voice suddenly came from outside the palace gate. Your Excellency, the believer who stole the offerings is still kneeling outside, begging for your forgiveness. Please take a look. Doma's good mood was interrupted, and a hint of displeasure and coldness flashed in his eyes. Ah, that ungrateful little mouse. He casually pulled Inosuke into his arms, his tone reverting to that feigned gentleness. What a disappointment! Let him in, he'll be a good teaching tool for my Inosuke. A moment later, the heavy door was pushed open, and a gaunt middle-aged man was dragged in by 2 guards. The man trembled violently, his clothes tattered, and upon seeing Doma on the platform, he began to kowtow frantically, his forehead slamming against the cold floor with a resounding thud. My lord, spare me! Spare me! I'm so hungry, my children are waiting for me to eat. You also have children. You'll definitely understand me. Doma looked down at the man as if he were an ant. I really want to forgive you. Doma sighed, his face filled with a sorrowful expression. But what you're stealing is an offering to God. If God is unhappy, I'll be in a difficult situation. The man's cries grew even more piercing, and an atmosphere of despair permeated the hall. Doma lowered his head, leaned close to Inosuke's ear, and whispered something like a devil's seduction. Inosuke, look, this person is crying. Now that you've learned the voice of God, you should tell him what to do. Should we send him to his death? Or should he leave his thieving hand behind as atonement? This is a question that could cost you your life. Doma was testing, enticing, trying to stain Inosuke's blank slate with the first drop of blood. Inosuke looked at the man below who was weeping bitterly. Although he betrayed his enemy to save his own life, Inosuke still had his principles. What kind of skill is it to bully someone who can't even get enough to eat? Since you've left the decision to me, don't blame me for not playing by the rules. Inosuke took a deep breath, gathering all his strength in his small chest. He activated the perfect pitch simulation again, and unleashed a childish yet deafening roar at the desperate man below the stage. Roll. One word. Simple and brutal, yet it resonated terrifyingly within the hall. The man was struck dumb, his mind went completely blank. To him, it was more than just a baby crying. This is God's forgiveness. It's a divine decree. God told him to leave, which means he won't kill him. Thank you, divine child. Thank you, master. Thank you, holy maiden. Long live the divine child. Long live the cult leader. Long live the holy maiden. The man was overjoyed and scrambled out of the hall, fearing that if he was even a second late, the divine son would change his mind. The hall fell silent once more. Doma raised an eyebrow, looking at the baby in his arms with a playful expression. Roll. He chuckled softly and gently poked Inosuke's cheek with his finger. I thought you would let him leave his hand behind, after all, stealing is punishable. Inosuke yawned, buried his head in Doma's arms, and snuggled against him, using the cold body heat to cool himself down. He sneered inwardly. Keep that guy alive, you idiot dad. He's all skin and bones. He wouldn't taste good, and he'd just make a mess of the floor. If we let him go, he'll spread the word that the blissful sect has produced a benevolent divine son, leading to even more believers and offerings. This is called casting a long line to catch a big fish. Looking at the seemingly harmless but actually deep-thinking baby in his arms, Doma suddenly burst out laughing. Heh, so that's how it is. You disdain punishing such ants? Or are you trying to win people's hearts? What a greedy yet clever little fellow. I'm liking you more and more. As Doma finished speaking, Inosuke felt a warm current surge in his chest. That was the system's reward for his successful use of his voice skills to achieve his goal. Lung capacity enhancement. Breathing becomes longer and stronger, which is a crucial foundation for future learning of breathing techniques. Very good. With increased lung capacity, I'll have more energy whether I'm swearing or wielding a knife. Chapter 5. Time quietly slipped away in the Eternal Bliss sect. 2 years later. Breathe. Breathe. In the back courtyard of the blissful sect, a toddler of about 2 years old was sitting cross-legged on a giant lotus flower, performing strange breathing exercises. This is none other than Hashabira Inosuke. He is no longer the baby who could only lie in swaddling clothes. He was exquisitely handsome, with fair skin and large, bright green eyes that resembled his birth mother's. But that reckless and unruly temperament is very much like Doma's. If you ignored the occasional glint of wickedness in his eyes, he would look like a celestial being straight out of a New Year's painting. He had forgotten many of his memories from before he transmigrated, but strangely, his memories of the original story became increasingly clear. Under Doma's tutelage over the past few years, his personality has become increasingly strange. System monitoring, current vital capacity utilization efficiency is 80%. The passive skill lung capacity enhancement level 1 is undergoing a qualitative leap from a quantitative one. Inosuke took a deep breath, his chest bulging, and the surrounding cold air was inhaled into his lungs and limbs like a whale swallowing water. After 2 years of adjustment, he discovered that his father's bedroom was practically a natural training ground. The air here is thin and cold, making it difficult for ordinary people to breathe. However, with the lung capacity rewarded by the system, he managed to develop a rudimentary form similar to the total concentration technique. Young Master! Young Master, please slow down. Why are you sitting here again? The divine child is truly amazing. Am I already falling behind at 2 years old? From afar came the anxious shouts and complaints of a maid. Inosuke opened his eyes. It was Kume, the maid who had been taking care of him for the past 2 years. Tch, so verbose. Inosuke flipped and jumped off the ice lotus, his movements as light as a kitten. Although only 2 years old, the physical abilities and intelligence of this child are simply outrageous. In addition, he deliberately imitates Doma's movements, so now he walks around the church with an air of arrogance that makes him want to be punched. Just then. Boom! A loud bang came from the front hall. Immediately afterwards, the ground shook violently, and the sound of tiles shattering filled the air. Enemy attack! The maid was so frightened that she collapsed to the ground. Inosuke's eyes lit up. This commotion, this soaring ghostly aura, is definitely not from an ordinary person, not even an ordinary pillar. At this point in time, there is only one person in the entire world who dares to disrupt the children's entertainment venue. Has it finally arrived? Inosuke's lips curled up, revealing 2 sharp little fangs. Instead of running away, he took his short legs and ran towards the center of the explosion. The front hall was in a mess. The once magnificent golden gate has been blasted into pieces. Amidst the billowing dust, 2 figures stand facing each other. Doma still had a smiling face, but half of his head had been smashed open and was regenerating at a visible speed. He waved the tattered fan in his hand, his tone full of surprise. Oh my, isn't this Lord Akaza? What brings you here to visit? Has he finally seen the light and decided to join my eternal bliss cult? I can also make you a god. Opposite to Doma stood a muscular man with dark blue tattoos all over his body and short pink hair. Upper Moon 3, Akaza. At this moment, veins bulged on his forehead, and his fists were still smeared with Doma's brains. He was clearly furious. Shut up, Doma! Akaza's voice was filled with suppressed anger. Lord Muzan summons me. You're just dawdling here and refusing to move, do you want to die? Because I'm playing with the kids. Doma's newly grown mouth immediately began to chatter incessantly. By the way, Lord Akaza, you must meet my son. He's so cute, he's just destruction and chaos. Akaza didn't want to listen to his nonsense at all, and raised his hand to throw a punch, intending to smash Doma's lower body as well. Just as the fist was about to unleash its power, a childish voice suddenly rang out beside them. Wow! It's a talking striped basketball. The air froze once again. Akaza's fist froze in mid-air. He turned his head, his golden eyes fixed on the source of the sound. On the pile of ruins stood a beautiful young child. The little child stared wide-eyed with innocent curiosity at Akaza's tattoos, even gesturing with his tiny hand to show them. Dad, is this basketball a new toy you bought for me? Doma, pfft. Akaza. Toy. 2 tic-tac-toe characters appeared on Akaza's forehead. He, the mighty Upper Moon 3, the pinnacle of martial arts, was actually called a striped basketball by a mere human child? You still call it a toy? Domo, child's mill, dot. Akaza turned to look at Doma, his killing intent almost tangible. Is this also one of your twisted sense of humor? Raising such a fragile thing? Don't say that. Doma appeared beside Inosuke in an instant, picked him up, and showed him off to Akaza like he was showing off a new handbag. Look. This is my son, Inosuke. Isn't he adorable? Inosuke, quickly call him uncle. This is your third uncle, you know. He might have a bit of a temper, though. But he never hit women or children, he was a really good person. But you can't learn from him. Inosuke mentally gave Doma a thumbs up. Although his own father was a bit slow-witted, he was really willing to betray his teammates at crucial moments, directly revealing Akaza's principle of not killing. Since that's the case, then I won't stand on ceremony. Inosuke looked at Akaza's face, which was as black as the bottom of a pot, and suddenly stretched out his hands, opening them towards Akaza. Hug. Akaza was stunned. Doma was stunned too. I want to hug that striped uncle. Inosuke squirmed in Doma's arms, pointing at Akaza with an innocent and naive expression. He looks so warm. Unlike you, Dad, who's so cold. System determination, the host is engaging in a highly dangerous and suicidal act. Analysis, by exploiting Akaza's contempt for him and his principle of not killing, a tug-of-war is created. Akaza got goosebumps all over when he saw the human cub reaching out for a hug. In his entire life, he had killed pillars and demons, but he had never dealt with this kind of thing. These creatures are so reckless and still insist on sticking to us. Take it away. Akaza took a half step back, looking disgusted. Stay away from me. Oh dear, is Lord Akaza shy? Doma, always eager for a good show, simply handed Inosuke to Akaza. Come on, a hug won't hurt you. This child really likes you. Inosuke's teamwork was impeccable, the instant Doma handed it over, he lunged forward. Like a koala, it clung directly to Akaza's arm. Gotcha! Inosuke shouted with joy. What you get is muscle, and that fiery fighting spirit. Completely different from the chilling aura of Doma, is this the life force of the fighting demon? Akaza froze completely. Shake off? With his strength, the child would turn into mincemeat with just a little effort. Kill? His principles prevented him from harming a young child who posed no threat and was even smiling at him. Doma! Akaza let out a roar, a howl born of utter disgust. Take this thing away! Ha 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 ha! Doma laughed so hard he almost fell over. Inosuke, clinging to Akaza's arm, felt a surge of joy as he sensed the Upper Moon 3's near collapse. Although it's suicidal, as long as you bet on Akaza's bottom line correctly, this is the safest haven. End. Ding. The host has successfully made close contact with Upper Moon 3 and survived. Hidden achievement triggered, Young and Fearless. Reward distribution, Basic Attribute Enhancement, Agility Enhancement Level 1. Note, to jump back and forth between two Upper Moon demons, you need fast legs. A light and ethereal power surged into my legs. Inosuke let go, landing steadily on the ground, then made a face at Akaza. Oh! Uncle's such a cheapskate. After saying that, he took off running. Compared to a 2-year-old, Inosuke was practically a prodigy. Akaza took a deep breath, his fists clenching so tightly they cracked. He turned to look at Doma, his eyes cold. Lord Muzan is waiting. Immediately, right now, come with me. If I see that brat again, I'll make an exception and kill him. Having said that, Akaza rushed out without looking back, as if some ferocious beast was behind him. Oh dear, what an easy person to tease. Doma stroked his chin, watching Inosuke's retreating figure, lost in thought. However, Inosuke actually dared to touch Akaza on his own initiative. That instinct to sense danger, and that courage. Indeed, my parenting was correct. Doma picked up the broken fan from the ground, his smile growing even brighter and more triumphant. Just wait, Lord Muzan, I have a big surprise for you. Chapter 6. Akaza's figure vanished completely, leaving behind only a mess and lingering fighting spirit. Oh dear, you're so impatient. After repairing his shattered half-head, Doma dusted off his cult leader robes, his face still bearing that warm and inviting smile. He glanced down at Inosuke, who had just slipped back to his room, and his eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. Hey, Inosuke! Doma vanished in an instant, then approached Inosuke with a beaming smile. That man in stripes just said that some important person is in a bad mood and has summoned us. Inosuke's heart skipped a beat, and he silently took half a step back with both feet. A big shot? Isn't that Muzan Kibutsuji? That's the kind of scum who'll kill you on a whim if he's in a bad mood or if he thinks your breathing is too loud. Dad, you should go quickly, don't be late. Inosuke waved obediently, his face full of innocence. I'll wait for you to come home. I'll eat well and grow strong. No, no, no. Doma extended his long, slender index finger and shook it. How can Dad leave such a cute Inosuke home alone? What if a mouse carries him away? Before he could finish speaking, he scooped up Inosuke and held him directly against his neck. Just like when Inosuke first traveled through time and climbed up on his own, only this time he was forced to. Come on. I'll show you around. This is special treatment, you know. Ordinary ghosts can't even go to that place. Inosuke's suicide pact, the Great War. Are you kidding me? I'm just a 2-year-old right now, going to the Infinite City? Is that a place where people can go? That means they deliver takeout directly to your door. But the protest was ineffective. Clang! A clear, melodious pipa sound rang out in the air. This was not Doma's ability, but a summons from that space. With the sound of the pipa, Inosuke felt a sudden sensation of weightlessness. The once solid ground instantly turned into nothingness. The blissful sect has disappeared. When he opened his eyes again, the scenery around him had completely changed. The familiar surroundings had completely changed, all around were crisscrossing wooden pavilions. Like an absurd scene that appears in a dream. Countless steps stretched endlessly in the darkness, seemingly without end. Space is distorted here, this is the alternate dimension controlled by the female demon named Nakame. Infinite City. We've arrived. Doma walked with light steps on the vertical corridor, as if strolling on flat ground. Ahead, on a huge platform, stood a figure with his back to them. The person was dressed in a black kimono, tall and slender, with slightly curly black hair, and was studying something at a table covered with test tubes and books. Even just a glimpse of his back exuded a terrifying pressure that made Inosuke feel a stinging pain all over his body. Run! Run! Inosuke's primal instincts roared, but his reason told him he couldn't move at all. Gruesome adult! Doma's cheerful voice broke the deathly silence, completely ignoring the somber atmosphere. I'm here. And I brought a little surprise. The figure slowly turned around. Crimson eyes, vertical pupils, and skin as pale as paper. Muzan Kibutsuji. His gaze swept over Doma like a blade, then landed on Inosuke, who was wrapped around Doma's neck. For a moment, Inosuke felt as if he were being stared at by an ancient Tyrannosaurus Rex. My blood was almost freezing, and air was being forcibly squeezed out of my lungs. Doma. Muzan's voice was icy cold and devoid of any inflection. I called you to the meeting. What are you doing bringing a human cub here? Do you think there isn't enough food here? A murderous aura instantly enveloped Inosuke. If Doma's answer doesn't satisfy Muzan, Inosuke will turn into a pool of blood in the next second. Doma, however, remained completely unperturbed, instead raising Inosuke high in the air as if presenting a treasure. It's not food, Lord Muzan. This is my son. He's an incredibly talented child. He just hugged Lord Akaza, and he hasn't been killed yet. And he's not afraid of me, nor is he afraid of blood. I think he's a born genius. Muzan narrowed his eyes, looking at Inosuke. Humans? Talent? He hates things that are vague and ethereal, and he also hates uncontrollable variables. Boring. Muzan raised his hand, his tone filled with disgust. Since it's not a ghost, then there's no need for it to exist. It's time to make a move. Inosuke's brain was working at lightning speed at that moment. Cry? He's doomed, Muzan hates noise the most. Beg for mercy? They're doomed, Muzan looks down on the weak. Relying on Doma? That idiot is a fun-loving person, he'll definitely hesitate for a second. We must save ourselves. Only by proving yourself. It possesses a quality that even the Demon King cannot ignore. Just as Muzan was about to strike, Inosuke suddenly activated the aura granted by his enhanced lung capacity. He forcefully suppressed his racing heart, trying to keep his voice steady despite his extreme fear. At this moment, in the deathly silence of the Infinity Castle, besides Muzan's voice, Inosuke heard something else. That was the internal noise captured by perfect pitch, noise that even an upper moon demon would ignore. Inosuke stared wide-eyed at Muzan's chest and head, his face showing a mixture of extreme confusion and astonishment. He opened his mouth and, in a childish yet remarkably clear voice, asked a question that shocked all the ghosts present. Even the other upper moons, who were secretly eavesdropping, were horrified by this question. Hey! Father! Inosuke pointed at Muzan, tilted his head, and asked innocently. Why are there 7 drums beating inside this handsome uncle's body? Thump, 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 thump. Inosuke mimicked the rhythmic pattern, patted his chest with his small hand, and then pointed at Muzan's head. And why are there 5 brain cells moving around inside this head? They're jostling and making a lot of noise. Dead silence. Absolute silence. Even Nakame, who was playing the biwa in the distance, was so shocked that her hand trembled and a murmur escaped her lips. For the first time, the smile on Doma's face froze. Muzan's previously cold and disgusted expression froze instantly, followed by extreme shock and a violent tremor in his crimson pupils. 7 hearts, 5 brains. This is the ultimate secret of Muzan's physical structure. Apart from himself, not even the upper moon demons had ever known it so clearly. It is absolutely invisible to the naked eye, even a transparent world requires extremely high levels of martial arts skill. How did this 2-year-old human toddler know all this? In Inosuke's perfect pitch, the abnormal sound of blood flowing through Muzan's body, the booming sound of his 7 hearts beating alternately, was as clear in his mind as a motorcycle speeding through the night. Muzan's figure vanished instantly, and the next second, he appeared directly in front of Doma, his pale face almost touching Inosuke's nose. "What did you say?" Muzan stared intently into Inosuke's eyes, his vertical pupils trembling violently. "Can you hear me?" Inosuke had no way out at this point. He suppressed his fear and once again displayed his Oscar-worthy acting skills. He reached out his chubby little hand and actually tried to touch Muzan's face. There was no fear in his eyes, only the innocent joy of seeing a new and exciting toy. "It's really noisy, handsome uncle." Inosuke grinned, revealing two sharp little fangs. But the sound was very loud, much louder than Dad's. "Is this the sound of a strong person?" Muzan stared at this audacious cub. Normally, anyone who dared to say he was noisy would have died long ago. But now, a human being who can see right through his body structure? This sensitivity, this spirit of remaining composed and witty even in the face of his overwhelming pressure. "Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha!" Muzan suddenly chuckled. He turned around, his back to Doma. "Domo, Child's Mill, in." Doma was also stunned by what he had just witnessed, but at this moment he was more excited. "Keep this." A hint of interest appeared in Muzan's voice. "If he lives to see me again, perhaps he'll be eligible to receive my blood, if he accidentally dies." Muzan turned his head and glanced at Inosuke with a cold gaze. "Then gouge out his ears and brain and offer them to me." "Yes, sir." Muzan. Doma happily hugged Inosuke tightly, and waved his fan. "Did you hear that, Inosuke? That person praised you." Inosuke clung to Doma's shoulder, his body drenched in cold sweat. He watched Muzan's retreating figure and mentally gave him the middle finger. Clang! The sound of the peep rang out again. Doma and Inosuke disappeared into the Infinity Castle. Only Muzan Kibutsuji remained, lost in thought. "Can you hear my heart?" Muzan stared into the void, a strange red light flashing in his eyes. "He looks a bit like him." "Humph, interesting." Chapter 7. The sound of the pipa faded away. The nauseating space vanished, and the familiar aura of the back mountain of the Eternal Bliss sect once again wafted towards us. Doma landed safely with Inosuke. Phew! Doma patted his chest, his face showing an exaggerated yet somewhat fearful expression. "Oh dear, that really scared Daddy." "Inosuke, you were far too honest in front of Lord Muzan just now." Looking at Inosuke still riding on his shoulders, a hint of satisfaction appeared in his eyes. "However, since Lord Muzan said he'd keep him, that means you can't just be a cute mascot anymore." Doma reached out and poked Inosuke's forehead with his finger. "You have to become stronger, strong enough to be qualified to receive that person's blood, or strong enough to struggle a little when you die, to add some fun for the audience. Dad will miss you. Mom can't bear to part with you either. So, you must become stronger." Inosuke blinked his big eyes, looking completely obedient. "Okay, Dad. I'll eat well and grow up strong." Doma smiled with satisfaction. "Good boy/girl. Time flies, like a white horse galloping past a crack in the wall." Spring passed and autumn came, 5 years quietly slipped by in the blissful retreat. Inosuke is 7 years old. Over the course of those 5 years, the original memories of the Transmigrator have completely disappeared. Only the original plot remains imprinted in my mind, lingering there. His personality became increasingly arrogant and harsh, yet a gentle heart remained hidden within. Doma's indifference to life and Kotoha's gentle teachings clashed in his mind. He knows right from wrong, but he doesn't care. The combination of these two educational methods allowed Inosuke to focus on only one thing. He wants anything that benefits him, anything that makes him stronger, anything that brings him money, anything that is good. By this time, he had lost his baby fat and his body was beginning to grow taller and stronger. Although his face still inherited his mother Kotoha's stunning beauty, like a delicate porcelain doll. If you lift up his loose-fitting GI, you'll discover that this small body is covered with an extremely well-defined layer of muscles. This is the result of years of hard work. The path he chose was not as easy as he had imagined. He must protect his first mother in this hellish place. Behind the mountain, by the lotus pond. Breathe in. Breathe in. Long, drawn-out breaths echoed in the quiet courtyard. This is precisely the qualitative change brought about by the enhancement of lung capacity. With each breath, Inosuke can take in the maximum amount of oxygen. Allow the body's functions to enter a burst state similar to total concentration. Come on, Inosuke. Doma stood on the water, casually waving his golden fan. Today I'll teach you this move, Blood Demon Technique, Withered Garden Snowfall. Doma flicked his wrist slightly. Swish! 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 Several plumes of fan-shaped mist, carrying a deadly chill capable of instantly freezing a person, swept towards Inosuke. This is not teaching, this is murder. If it were an ordinary human, even a 7-year-old martial arts prodigy, facing Upper Moon 2's blood demon art, their only fate would be to be turned into an ice sculpture. But Inosuke neither dodged nor looked at it. He closed his eyes. In that instant, the world around him changed in his perception. This isn't a system reward, it's an innate talent of Hashabira Inosuke's body. Extraordinary tactile sensation. His skin was extremely sensitive, he could even clearly sense the movement of air, subtle changes in temperature, and the direction of killing intent. Here. 3 streams of air flowed from the left, 5 from the right, and the coldest air pressed down from above. The sensation of air on the skin is like a precise radar. Ino's help. He suddenly lowered his center of gravity, his body almost touching the ground. Those calf muscles, enhanced by the system, exploded instantly, and the whole person turned into a blur. It glided through the dense ice fog in a posture that almost defied the structure of human joints. Oh! Doma's eyes lit up. Not only has your sense of touch become more acute, but your speed has also increased this much. Old deng, it's not over yet. Inosuke sneered inwardly. He didn't have a Nichiren sword, but he did have a pair of fans that Doma had given him. In this environment filled with ice, the original beast breathing technique was not very effective. What he was going to use was a technique he had honed over the past 5 years by taking advantage of his ice spirit physique, constantly breathing in Doma's cold air, and enduring Doma's beatings every day. Full concentration ice breathing. Inosuke inhaled sharply, drawing in the chilling aura emanating from the surrounding Doma. An ordinary person would suffer lung necrosis from inhaling this air, but he, possessing the ice spirit physique, felt that this chilling air was like a tonic. First type. Inosuke pushed off the ground with both feet, his figure flashing like a ghost into the icy mist. He waved his fans wildly, not to block, but to guide. Ice-breathing Type 1 Windmill Fan. Call. Boom. The 2 fans spun rapidly in his hands, creating a small tornado from the resulting gust of wind. A miraculous scene unfolded. The deadly ice crystals released by Doma were actually drawn into Inosuke's own wind pressure. The blood demon art that was originally aimed at him was abruptly changed direction by him. Here you go! Inosuke roared, forcefully pushing back the storm carrying Doma's chilling aura. Doma stood there, watching the swirling icy mist return, his colorful eyes widening slightly. Oops! He raised his fan and gently blocked the mist, which dissipated. But he wasn't angry, instead, it was as if he had witnessed some incredible miracle. Inosuke. Doma looked at Inosuke, who was panting but unharmed. You're clearly human, you don't possess blood demon magic, so how can you manipulate my ice? Inosuke wiped the sweat from his brow, revealing a smug smile that showed off 2 cute little fangs. Because I'm a genius, Dad. Since I don't have any ice, why don't I just steal yours? This is Inosuke's self-created ice-breathing technique. Doma stared at Inosuke for a long time, then suddenly laughed happily and pulled the sweaty Inosuke into his arms. "That's amazing! That's amazing! That's amazing! As expected of my son. This logic is exactly the same as the doctrines of the Eternal Bliss sect. To steal the pain of others and transform it into your own pleasure, Inosuke, you truly are a born successor to the cult leader." Inosuke rolled his eyes in Doma's arms. "Inherit my I'm doing this so that if you ever have a moment of weakness and want to ruin this family, I'll wake you up. Then your blood demon magic will be ineffective against me, and you'll be obediently following my orders." Ding! Detected that the host has successfully utilized their talent and system rewards to create the prototype of a brand new breathing style. Style classification: ice breathing. System reward: no substantial reward. Comment: noob, but you're on the right track. Keep practicing. You're only scratching the surface. No new cheats, no new skills. There was only one cold, unresponsive person continuing to practice. Inosuke looked at the system panel and grinned instead. "That's more like it. True strength is forged through one's own efforts and by taking things from others." "Father." Inosuke pushed Doma aside and waved his fan. "Again. I haven't learned that move yet, so use that snowfall trick again. This time, I'm going to steal your ice lotus too." "Okay." Doma was in a great mood. "Dad will be a little more serious this time." Chapter 8. The two practiced for a long time. The icy mist in the courtyard gradually dissipated, leaving the ground covered with shattered ice crystals. Doma put away his fan and looked at his 7-year-old son, who was panting but had a fierce look in his eyes, with ecstatic joy. Although this move, Withered Garden Snowfall, only used less than 10% of his power, it was still, after all, the blood demon art of Upper Moon too. For an ordinary person, let alone fight back, just inhaling that cold air would instantly cause lung damage. But Inosuke was not only unharmed, he also stole the cold energy for his own use like a robber. "Inosuke, a fan is useful, but it's ultimately not a weapon for killing." Doma turned and walked into the depths of the corridor, his voice drifting back softly. "Now that you've learned how to steal my ice, it's time to give you a real weapon. Come with me, let's go to the storeroom and pick out something you like." Inosuke wiped the sweat from his brow, tucked the replica gold fans into his waistband, and caught up with Doma in a few steps. The armory of the Eternal Bliss cult is piled high with spoils of war collected by Doma over the past 200 years. Among them were many Nichiren blades left behind by fallen Demon Slayer core swordsmen, some were rusted, while others still gleamed with a chilling light. "How was this round?" Doma casually pulled a Nichiren sword, polished to a mirror-like finish, from the shelf and tossed it to Inosuke. This was left behind by a user of the Breath of Flame technique 50 years ago. "The blade is very heavy, it should be suitable for your monstrous strength." Inosuke reached out and caught it. He was very satisfied with the heavy feel of it. He drew his sword, its blade was sharp and its cold light was intimidating, clearly a fine knife. However, Inosuke frowned. "It's too slippery." He curled his lip in disgust. "This slippery stuff offers no resistance when cutting into meat, there's absolutely no satisfying tearing sensation." Tongmo tilted his head. "Oh? So what do you want?" Inosuke did not answer. He looked around, his gaze settling on a large stone used to weigh down the warehouse entrance. The next second, to Doma's astonishment, Inosuke walked over carrying the Nichiren blade. He picked up the stone and smashed it down hard against the blade. Clang! 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 The crisp sound of metal clashing echoed through the warehouse. The once smooth blade, under Inosuke's relentless attack, was chipped with jagged edges, becoming more like a saw. "Call!" Inosuke threw away the stone, picked up the mangled sword, and looked at it in the moonlight. The shark tooth-like blade brought a satisfied smile to his face. "This looks much better. Dad, this is what a knife should be." Before, it was called, a piece of iron. If the demon slayer Kor's swordsmiths saw this, they would probably be so angry that they would vomit blood and die on the spot. But when Doma looked at the disfigured sword, he was stunned for a moment, and then burst into joyful laughter again. Ha ha ha! Funny! Really funny! Doma clapped his hands, his eyes full of admiration. Do you dislike a smooth ending and instead prefer the agonizing pain of being torn apart? Inosuke, your taste is becoming more and more like mine. This kind of knife, when it cuts into a wound, it must bring out even more flesh and blood, right? How wonderful! Inosuke rolled his eyes inwardly. Who looks like you? You arrogant dad! Now that we have the weapons, we should test their edge. Doma snapped his fingers. From the shadows in the corner of the warehouse, the sound of chains being dragged suddenly came. A hidden door slowly opened, and a strong stench of decay wafted out. A blood-red demon, chained up, charged out like a mad dog. But he was pulled back by the chains halfway there, and could only let out hoarse roars at Inosuke. This is a low-ranking demon, captured by Doma specifically to dispose of the corpses of disobedient followers. Even your father won't bully you. Doma stepped aside, fanning himself, and said with a smile. I've starved this ghost for 3 days, and now all he sees is meat. Inosuke, kill him. Use your new knife, and your self-invented breathing technique. If you lose, you'll become his midnight snack. Just kidding. Doma muttered to himself. Inosuke gripped his Nickerin blade tightly, feeling the nauseating stench of blood in the air. Extraordinary tactile sensation activated instantly. In his perception, the ghost's murderous aura was like a sharp thorn, aimed directly at his throat. The trajectory of the airflow came into his view. A starving ghost. Perfect for consecrating my sword. Inosuke showed no fear whatsoever, instead, he took a deep breath, his chest heaving violently. A surge of oxygen rushed into his bloodstream, and he instantly entered battle mode. Roar! The demon roared and broke a rusty iron chain, then lunged at Inosuke with its claws outstretched. It's here! Inosuke didn't retreat, instead, he pushed off the ground with both legs, advancing instead of retreating. He ducked low, like a cannonball, and slipped through the demon's claws. At the same time, the serrated knife in his hand was suddenly swung out. Complete collection of ice-breathing second form. This technique doesn't require using the ice from the Doma, a type of icicle, but rather utilizes the characteristics of a serrated blade to mimic the sharpness of icicles. Ice-breathing second form, ice-shattering fangs. Pfft! The blade slashed viciously into the demon's neck. Because the blade was uneven, the cutting process was not smooth, instead, it was like a saw frantically hooking and scythe-like into the demon's muscle fibers and cervical vertebrae. The ear-piercing scraping sound, like cutting through ice, sent chills down one's spine. Break it off! With a roar, Inosuke's arms bulged with veins, and through sheer brute force, he severed the demon's head as if sawing wood. Glug glug! The demon's head rolled to the ground, its eyes still filled with disbelief and terror. He never imagined that he would die at the hands of a 7-year-old human child, and in such a brutal manner. Inosuke flicked the black blood off his sword and stepped on the disintegrating corpse of the demon. He turned to look at Doma, revealing his signature smile, a smile that was both innocent and tinged with a hint of malice. Dad, this knife is great. It feels really good to saw bones. Seeing this, Doma was so moved that he almost shed tears. He stepped forward and gently patted Inosuke's head. It's perfect. Inosuke, you are now a qualified divine child. Since that's the case, let's make preparations. The holy scripture of the eternal bliss cult is in a few days, and many outsiders will be coming then. Dad has prepared a bigger stage for you. Go and bring a little bit of divine awe to those ignorant and arrogant humans. Chapter 9. The ceremony arrived as scheduled, and the main hall was colder and more luxurious than usual. In the very center of the main hall, atop a lotus throne, Doma lazily rested his chin on his hand, looking down at the hundreds of kneeling worshippers below. Among these believers were not only ordinary people, but also wealthy merchants, and even a few samurai ronin with swords at their waists. They all came because of its reputation. Gentlemen! Doma's unique divine voice echoed throughout the hall. Today is the sacred day of the blissful religion, and I hear that your hearts are filled with pain and confusion. Whether it be poverty, disease, or the fear of death, everything will vanish when you come into my arms. The believers kowtowed fervently, shouting for the leader's mercy. However, amidst this frenzied atmosphere, an untimely voice suddenly rang out. I've long heard that the Lord of Bliss possesses the divine power to bring the dead back to life, but seeing him today, apart from this hall being unusually cold, there doesn't seem to be anything special about it. The speaker was an obese, wealthy merchant. He had a geisha in his arms, and a tall, burly bodyguard with a sword followed behind him. This wealthy merchant, named Tanaka, was a notorious bully in the area. Relying on the group of Ronin samurai he kept at home, he had always acted arrogantly and domineeringly. His visit today is less of a pilgrimage and more of a pretext to cause trouble and establish his authority. The air inside the hall froze instantly. The believers stared at the field in horror, as if they were looking at a dead man. Doma's smile didn't diminish at all, in fact, it became even brighter. Oh dear, this benefactor seems to have some doubts about my divine power. What a pitiful child! Is it because he feels so empty inside that he can only resort to this kind of behavior to gain attention? Stop talking nonsense! Tanaka waved his hand, pointing to the guards behind him, and said. This is the swordsman I hired at great expense, Mr. Sasaki. I heard your sect has some kind of divine child, someone very powerful? Why not let him show off his skills? If he can defeat my guard, I'll donate half my fortune to the church. If he can't... Hey hey! Tanaka sneered. Then don't blame me for tearing down your shabby, pretentious temple. Doma blinked and turned to look at a small ice chair sitting to his left. There sat a 7-year-old boy. Inosuke was idly toying with his serrated, chipped Nichiren blade when he heard someone call his name. He slowly raised his head. There was no anger at being provoked in her emerald eyes, only an annoyance at having her daydreaming interrupted. Father! This fat pig is so noisy. Inosuke stood up, stretched his neck, and made a series of cracking sounds. Can I quiet him down? Doma clapped his hands happily. Of course you can. If the guest wants to witness a miracle, then as the young master, you should naturally fulfill the guest's wish. But be careful not to get the main hall floor dirty, it's very difficult to clean. Especially the blood of livestock. It was smelly and dirty. Inosuke, carrying the saw-like sword, slowly walked down from the platform. The Ronin samurai Sasaki couldn't help but sneer as he looked at the brat who barely reached his waist. Little devil, have you stopped breastfeeding? Holding a broken, tattered piece of scrap metal, you want to start a duel? Let's wait until it grows to my collarbone in a few years. Sasaki slowly drew his katana from his waist. It was a well-maintained sword, its blade gleaming white. It was a sword his father had given him. He assumed a standard Iaido stance, his eyes filled with contempt. Don't blame me for bullying you, I'll try to be quick, so you won't feel any pain. Before he could finish speaking, Inosuke's figure suddenly disappeared. It appeared directly in front of him. Sasaki's pupils contracted sharply, his swordsman's instincts told him he sensed danger. He instinctively swung his knife, trying to force back the charging brat. However, Inosuke did not back down an inch. Extraordinary tactile senses fully activated. The gust of air created by Sasaki's sword strike felt as clear on Inosuke's skin as if it were being gently brushed by his mother's fingers. The angle, speed, and point of impact of the blade were all flaws in his eyes. This person is very weak. Too slow. Too light. Too soft. Inosuke roared, his enhanced lung capacity making the sound like a beast's howl, so loud it hurt Sasaki's eardrums, and his body, holding the sword, stiffened for a moment. In that instant, Inosuke gripped the serrated blade with both hands and slashed it upwards at Sasaki's gleaming katana. Ice-breathing third form, avalanche fangs. When a piercingly harsh clang of metal rang out. The serrated notch on Inosuke's blade had somehow managed to jam Sasaki's blade. What? Sasaki was horrified. He felt as if he had struck not a knife, but a mountain. The strange force transmitted through the hilt of the knife caused his tiger's mouth to split open instantly. Smash it! Inosuke grinned, revealing two sharp little fangs. He used his waist strength and twisted sharply. Click! A crisp snapping sound. Sasaki's sword was actually broken in half by Inosuke's sword. The broken blade spun out, grazing the scalp of the wealthy merchant Tanaka and shaving off a large patch of his already sparse hair. Tanaka was so frightened that he sat down on the ground with a thud, and a warm current flowed from his groin. He was so scared that he wet himself. But that's not all. After severing the opponent's weapon, Inosuke's offensive did not cease. Using the momentum of the rotation, he thrust the serrated knife forward, the cold blade slamming heavily into Sasaki's chest. Bang! The burly Ronin samurai was sent flying like a rag doll, crashing heavily into a pillar in the main hall. He spat out a mouthful of blood and immediately lost consciousness. The entire venue was deathly silent. Everyone stared wide-eyed at the 7-year-old boy standing in the center of the hall, holding a broken serrated knife. Inosuke shook his slightly numb wrist, slung the sword over his shoulder, and looked at the broken shards on the ground with disdain. You can't even withstand a blow from this piece of scrap metal, yet you dare to wield a knife. Waste of resources. He turned around, looked at the wealthy businessman who was paralyzed with fear, and revealed an innocent smile. Hey, Uncle Fatty, is your promise to donate half your fortune still valid? If you dare to renege, I'll use this knife to snap your neck too. No way. No way. I'll donate it all. I'll donate all my assets. Tanaka kowtowed repeatedly, fearing that if he hesitated even a second longer, this little devil would saw him in half. On the high platform, Doma watched this scene and laughed so hard he almost fell over, waving his golden fan even faster. That was amazing, Inosuke. Gentlemen. Doma stood up and opened his arms to the stunned believers below the stage. Do you see that? This is the young master I've trained, the guardian deity bestowed upon us by heaven. Young master is mighty. The master is merciful. A deafening cheer resounded once again throughout the hall. Inosuke stood in the center of the cheers, feeling the countless awe-inspiring gazes, but his mind was preoccupied with other matters. Half of the family fortune. We're rich now. We need to get Sato, the accountant, to hand over the work as soon as possible. Inosuke looked up at the lofty Doma. This silly old man has truly elevated himself to a level that most people can only dream of. Chapter 10. Winter always comes earlier for the blissful religion than elsewhere. After severing a swordsman's sword in the sacred texts and extorting half of a wealthy merchant's fortune, Inosuke's life became increasingly comfortable. Butler Sato was completely obedient to him. Even the usually arrogant high-ranking Christians had to respectfully address him as young master. But Inosuke did not indulge in this vanity. He knew very well that all these privileges were built upon Doma's interests. But inevitably, the young master's arrogance began to grow in his heart. 7-year-old Inosuke, dressed in a magnificent blue-patterned kimono, with a Nikaran sword at his waist and several heavy gold plates tossing in his hands, swaggered down the streets of the small town at the foot of the mountain. Young master, please walk slowly, the ground is slippery. Behind him, Sato, accompanied by 2 attendants, followed panting, carrying large and small bags. Shut up, you're too slow. Inosuke didn't turn around, his wooden clogs crunched lightly on the snow. Thanks to his enhanced agility, he moved across the snow as if it were flat ground, so fast that even the adults behind him struggled to keep up. Moreover, because of his ice spirit physique, he was dressed much more lightly than ordinary people, yet he didn't feel cold at all. On the contrary, he enjoyed the cold wind. Today, I'm going down the mountain to do just one thing. Spending money. Although the blissful religion has everything, some special items must be found in human markets. Why? I don't want to. I don't want to go. That's so far away. I'll die. I'll definitely die on the way. Suddenly, a piercing cry pierced through the bustling market. Inosuke frowned. The crying was extremely frequent, carrying a sense of despair on the verge of collapse, yet surprisingly powerful. So noisy. Inosuke stopped and turned his head to look at the other end of the street corner. There was a little boy, covered in dirt and wearing a yellow haori, clinging tightly to a telephone pole, his face smeared with snot and tears. No matter how much a middle-aged man who looked like a loan shark tried to pull him away, he wouldn't let go. Grandpa! Help! I'm going to be sold. I don't want to work anymore, I want to go home. It had a head of messy black hair, and a face that, even distorted by crying, still faintly revealed a hint of timidity. It was Zenitsu Agatsuma. The future sound pillar, or the future noise-generating machine. Inosuke squinted his eyes. Zenitsu looks about 6 or 7 years old right now. He's probably just been swindled out of his money, he looks pitiful, and also a little ridiculous. Young master, that beggar is too noisy. Should I go and chase him away? Sato leaned closer and asked eagerly. Need not. Inosuke withdrew his gaze, a playful smile playing on his lips. Zenitsu is still a good-for-nothing right now, associating with him will only bring trouble and no benefit. Let him cry. Being able to cry so loudly indicates good lung capacity, he's a potential martial arts student. Inosuke casually commented, then turned and walked into a nearby blacksmith shop. Sato stood there, stunned, completely bewildered. A martial arts prodigy? That little brat who only knows how to cry? The young master's taste is becoming increasingly incomprehensible. The blacksmith shop owner was very serious. When Inosuke came out of the blacksmith's shop, the sky was already somewhat overcast, and snowflakes drifted down onto the tip of his nose. Inosuke's mood is good. Just as he was about to head home, a strange feeling arose within him. For Inosuke, who possesses extraordinary tactile senses, it was a kind of mild, dry, like charcoal burning in winter. In this town teeming with desire, this atmosphere was strangely pure and out of place. Inosuke subconsciously followed that feeling and looked in that direction. At the end of the street, a boy wearing a black and green plaid haori, carrying a full basket of charcoal, was squatting by the roadside. He was hawking the charcoal in front of him. His face was red from the cold, with a dark red scar on his forehead, and a pair of sun-shaped paper earrings hanging from his ears. Kamatu Tanjiro. At this time, Tanjiro was only about 7 or 8 years old, and he was trying his best to sell charcoal to passers-by. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Kind sir, please buy some charcoal. The snow is getting heavier, and it will be very cold at night if we don't have enough charcoal for the fire. Inosuke stood in the crowd, quietly watching him. A strange sense of destiny arose spontaneously. One was Doma's adopted son. One is a future demon slayer swordsman. One is ice. One is fire. Just then, Tanjiro seemed to sense something. The nose, said to possess a divine sense of smell, twitched slightly. He whirled around, his gaze piercing through the crowd, and locked precisely on Inosuke. Their eyes met in mid-air. Tanjiro was stunned. He sensed a complex and contradictory feeling emanating from this boy who was even more beautiful than a girl. It possesses a crisp, clear air, perpetually enveloped in ice and snow, and also carries a bottomless, pungent stench of blood. He had never smelled anything like it before. But this boy clearly doesn't look very old. Inosuke looked at Tanjiro's shocked expression, and a slight stinging sensation rose on his skin. He's looking at me. That look in his eyes, it was as if he could see right through my soul. Young master. Seeing Inosuke stop, Sato called out in confusion. Inosuke ignored him and walked towards Tanjiro. Tanjiro tensed up instinctively. Although he didn't know why, he felt that this person his age was dangerous. Hey, charcoal seller! Inosuke walked up to Tanjiro and looked down at him. He deliberately increased his lung capacity to make his voice sound imposing, much like his father's. How much for your charcoal? Tanjiro paused for a moment, then immediately stood up and bowed respectfully. A basket only costs 200 coins, if you only need a little bit. Too little. Inosuke interrupted him, pulling a gleaming gold coin from his pocket and casually tossing it over. The golden jutsu traced an arc in the air and landed precisely in Tanjiro's hands, which were covered in frostbite. I'll take the whole basket. Inosuke's tone was flat. Ah! Tanjiro looked at the golden plate in his hand and was so startled he almost dropped the charcoal basket. This is too much. I can't make change. This one gold coin could buy me a whole year's worth of charcoal. Then keep it. Inosuke waved his hand impatiently. The rest can be a tip. How? You look down on my money? No, no, no. That's not what I meant. Tanjiro waved his hands frantically, his honest face filled with fear. But Mom said, one shouldn't receive something for nothing. Tisk. Inosuke frowned. You won't even take the money? He suddenly moved closer to Tanjiro. The distance between the two shortened to just a few feet. Inosuke could clearly hear the beating of Tanjiro's heart inside his chest. Thump, thump, thump. Steady, powerful, it sounds reassuring. Completely different from Muzan's noisy 7 hearts, and also different from Doma's deathly silence. Take it. Inosuke lowered his voice and spoke in a volume that only the two of them could hear. This money isn't given to you for nothing. Consider it buying your promise. Tanjiro was stunned, staring at the excessively handsome boy before him. What promise? Inosuke gave him a deep look, his gaze settling on the pair of sun-shaped paper earrings. It's getting dark, don't linger outside. Especially, when you smell the blood on me. Having said that, Inosuke gave Tanjiro no further chance to refuse. He turned and waved to Sato. Take this basket of charcoal with you. It's so cold in Dad's room, let's warm him up by the fire. Sato looked completely bewildered. The cult leader hates heat the most, aren't you just asking for trouble by bringing in charcoal? But he dared not disobey, and could only reluctantly go to move the charcoal. Inosuke turned and left, his figure quickly disappearing into the snowstorm. Tanjiro hugged the empty basket on his back, clutching tightly the golden plate that still held the warmth of Inosuke's body. He stood in the snow, looking in the direction the boy had disappeared, his nose twitching slightly. It smells so sad. Tanjiro mutters to himself. It's so domineering, why does it smell like? He seems to. What have I been carrying all along? Chapter 11. Inosuke was incredibly fast. After watching Tanjiro leave from afar, he took Sato back to the Paradise Cult. It was another snowy night, and the atmosphere inside the rear hall of the blissful sect was extremely eerie. Beside the throne, conspicuously placed, was a basket of black charcoal. Although the charcoal wasn't lit, it still retained the aroma of everyday life and the warmth of the sun. To a ghost with a keen sense of smell, it's like throwing a piece of stinky tofu into a room. Sato knelt on the ground, not daring to lift his head. Doma lay on his side on the ice couch, a folding fan covering his mouth and nose, his eyes filled with disgust. He glanced at the basket of charcoal, then looked at his son, who was sitting cross-legged to the side, looking completely self-righteous. Inosuke, Didn't your father teach you this before? Doma's voice sounded somewhat helpless. The Pure Land is a pure land. You're bringing this dirty stuff with you. Even the lingering smell of lowly human sweat returns. Are they trying to stink up my palace? Father, that's too superficial. Inosuke casually grabbed a piece of charcoal, tossed it in his hand, and the charcoal landed on his slender hand. This isn't charcoal at all. This is the heart of a person I bought back with a single gold coin. Inosuke stood up and pointed seriously at the basket of charcoal. That charcoal seller has a smell that I really dislike. Even when he was in dire straits, on the verge of freezing and starving to death, he remained as tenacious as a weed. I gave him enough wealth to change his destiny, just to see what he would do with the money. At this point, Inosuke revealed a sly smile, his two small fangs flashing. This basket of charcoal is my experimental sample. I'll keep it, it'll constantly remind me of that kid's existence. Let's go back and see in a few years. Will that spirited young man have turned into a useless person who only knows how to indulge in pleasure? Doma was stunned for a moment. He looked at the 7-year-old child before him, who could speak of manipulating people's hearts in such a grand and dignified way. The disdain in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by a gleam of surprise. Oh dear! Inosuke. Doma sat up straight, closed his folding fan, and clapped his hands softly. You really surprised me, giving hope to someone in despair. I have a strange fondness for waiting for hope to rot away. As expected of the child I raised myself. All right, although the smell is a bit unpleasant, since it's your tool for observing humans, you can keep it. Doma waved his hand, signaling Sato to step back, and then patted Inosuke's head with a pleased expression. It seems that taking you to see Lord Muzan that time was the right thing to do. Your vision has broadened beyond just killing. Inosuke obediently rubbed against Doma's palm, using his ice spirit constitution to absorb the cold energy emanating from the other. Keep it. This is the main character. If things really get out of control one day, we can still use our connections. Several more days passed peacefully. Inosuke's life was extremely regular. During the day, he practiced ice breathing diligently in the back mountain, and at night he went to the front hall to use his perfect pitch to perform mystical feats. Incidentally, they also extorted some money from those rich but heartless believers. Until that night, Inosuke had just finished his evening practice and was carrying his serrated Nichiren blade back to his villa. The moment he stepped into the courtyard, his skin tightened abruptly. A thick, chilly aura filled the air. Who? Inosuke paused, his gaze fixed on the rooftop. In the darkness, several crystal-clear threads, stronger than steel wire, silently descended, their target his throat. The response was good. A boy's voice rang out. A figure slowly rose from the roof ridge. A pale-skinned boy with a spider leg-like hairstyle. Tired. The 12 ghost months, the 5th of the lower moon. By order of that lord. Looking down at Inosuke from his high vantage point, Rui gently twitched his finger. Let's see how much progress that human with such keen hearing has made back then is now. If you're crippled, I'll tear your brain and ears off. Inosuke looked at the threads suspended in mid-air, and instead of being afraid, he raised an eyebrow. That coward Muzan doesn't dare come himself, so he sends Spider-Man to test me. Inosuke slung the sword over his shoulder, his tone extremely arrogant. Hey, Spiderhead, do you know whose territory this is? Did you get my permission to hang curtains in my house? He showed no sign of backing down. The young master of the blissful sect never gave anyone face. His tired eyes turned cold. You ignorant brat! His fingers tightened suddenly. Blood demon art, scrolling lines rotate. The silk threads, accompanied by a shrill whistling sound as they sliced through the air, descended upon Inosuke in a devastating barrage. Die! Exhausted, he coldly uttered 2 words. For an ordinary swordsman, facing these threads that are harder than steel, their sword would be severed the moment they made contact, and their body would be torn to pieces. But Inosuke is no ordinary swordsman. The knife in his hand was no ordinary knife either. "Open it for me!" Inosuke's outburst. The increased lung capacity caused his chest to swell instantly. Agility was enhanced. Instead of retreating, he advanced, actively charging into the web of death. The serrated Nichiren blade in his hand swept out horizontally. Ice-breathing third form avalanche fang. Complete collection. Squeak. A tooth-grinding scraping sound echoed through the night sky. Ari's prized silk thread was stuck in the jagged nicks on Inosuke's blade. "What?" Lei's deadpan face finally showed a look of shock. "Is this your line?" Inosuke gripped the sword with both hands, using the strength of his waist to twist and rip the silk threads apart wildly. "Too hard. Too brittle. It has no chewiness at all." Crash! 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 With a series of cracking sounds, the inescapable net was actually torn apart by Inosuke's brute force. Lei's pupils contracted slightly. Before he could react, a figure had already broken through the defenses, leaping onto the roof and landing in front of him. "Here's a gift for us, please accept it." Inosuke took a deep breath. Facing the nearby Lei, he activated his perfect pitch and unleashed a furious roar. Roll! Boom! The sound waves slammed into my tired eardrums. I felt so tired that my mind went blank, and my body stiffened for a moment. In that instant, Inosuke reversed the hilt of his sword, and the heavy back of the blade struck Lei's face hard. Snap! The crisp sound of a slap echoed through the night sky. The fifth crescent moon was flung away like a rag doll, crashing heavily onto the snow-covered ground in the yard, creating a large crater. Tisk, they've got some nerve. Inosuke landed, shook his slightly numb wrist, and looked at the ditch with disgust. Exhausted, he slowly climbed out of the snowdrift, half of his face already red and swollen. As Muzan's favorite, when had he ever suffered such a humiliating disgrace? He was slapped in the face with the back of a knife by a human child? "I'm going to tear you to pieces." Lei's ghostly aura surged wildly, and countless red threads emerged from his fingertips, preparing to unleash his true killing move. "Oh dear, that won't do." Just then, a light, airy voice broke into the battlefield. Doma appeared in the corridor at some unknown time, waving a golden fan and watching this scene with a smile. "Lei Jun, this is my home. If you tear down my house or break my son, I'll be really upset." Tired and stiff, he stared intently at Doma, then glanced at Inosuke, who was making a face at him. "Just a test." Gritting his teeth, he retracted the silk thread. "Since he has this ability, then you'll pass." Having said that, he turned away wearily. "Hey! Wait a minute!" Inosuke suddenly called out to him. Exhausted, he turned around, his eyes filled with a sinister glint. "Is there anything else?" Inosuke rubbed his hands together and pointed to the torn, shimmering threads on the ground. I think your thread is of good quality, quite sturdy." Inosuke said with a sincere expression. "Look, you came to my house late at night and even damaged the roof tiles. As compensation, how about you leave me 2 pounds of this thread? I think this material is pretty good, it should be great for knitting a vest or wristbands." Tired. Doma. His lips twitched violently twice from exhaustion. He'd lived so long, and he'd seen people who feared him, people who hated him, but he'd never seen a lunatic like this who wanted to use his blood demon arts to knit a sweater. No. Exhausted and with a dark complexion, his figure vanished into the night in an instant, turning into a blur. He swore he never wanted to come to this wretched place again in his life. "Tch, you stingy person!" Inosuke pursed his lips, bent down to pick up the few remaining pieces of silk from the ground, and stuffed them into his pocket. With a little processing, wrapping it around the handle of a serrated knife looks so nice, and it's so sticky and prevents slipping. "Dad, look!" Inosuke waved his spoils at Doma. Doma shook his head helplessly, his smile deepening. Inosuke, your personality is becoming more and more like mine. But... Doma looked up at the moon, which was completely obscured by dark clouds. Since Lord Muzan has sent someone to test us, it means that moment is approaching. Inosuke, is your sword sharpened? Inosuke touched the nicked sword at his waist, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Don't worry, Dad. My knife won't embarrass you. Chapter 12. That morning after I left, exhausted. Strange friction sounds came from the blissful sex annex. Inosuke sat cross-legged under the veranda, holding half a pound of spider silk he had extorted from Rui. As Rui had said, the thread was indeed exceptionally strong, impervious to water and fire, and even difficult to cut with ordinary blades. However, Inosuke had to constantly release cold air into it, otherwise it would break when exposed to sunlight. This is good stuff. Muttering to himself, Inosuke wrapped the crystal-clear silk thread around the handle of his serrated knife, again and again. The original sharkskin wrapping around the handle provided a non-slip grip, but it wasn't sticky enough for vigorous slashing. The silk threads have a unique stickiness and toughness. Once wrapped around the skin, the grip is instantly elevated to a higher level. Even if my hands are covered in blood and sweat, this knife will feel as if it's permanently attached to my hand, and I will never let it slip from my grasp. Inosuke, what are you doing? Doma, like a ghost, hung upside down from the ceiling, his exquisite face hovering right in front of Inosuke, his long hair falling and brushing against the tip of Inosuke's nose. Wrap the hilt of the knife. Without even looking up, Inosuke skillfully tied a knot and brandished his serrated knife. Huff! Huff! The sound of the blade cutting through the air was deep and powerful. But he frowned and put the knife down again. What's wrong? Is it not working well? Doma rolled over and landed on the ground, waving his exquisite gold fan. Too light. Inosuke stood up and stretched his shoulders. With age and daily lung capacity training, his strength was increasing at a rate that defied logic. While holding a knife with one hand is agile, it always feels like the other hand is empty, and the body's center of gravity cannot achieve perfect balance. The other part of the body was completely superfluous and not fully utilized at all. Besides, with only one knife, it's not satisfying to chop around. Inosuke made a cross gesture. If two swords saw down at the same time, like the teeth of a crocodile biting together, the moment of tearing someone apart would be magnified many times over. Doma's eyes lit up. Dual swords? Oh dear, that's really hard to master. However, if it were Inosuke, he might be able to create a completely new style. And this too. Inosuke pointed to the fan in Doma's hand, and then to the two imitation fans he used for practice at his waist. Don't lose the fan either. Although it's not as satisfying to slash as a knife, it's still very useful for creating wind pressure, confusing the enemy's vision, or fanning back your ice mist. So. Inosuke raised his head, revealing his emerald green eyes, filled with greed and ambition. Father, I need another knife. You also need a pair that can actually be used in battle, like the fans in your hand. Not the kind of gold-plated item that breaks at the slightest touch, but the kind that could kill. Doma was stunned for a moment, then covered his face and laughed, his shoulders shaking with laughter. Greed. So incredibly greedy. Wanting both dual swords and a fan? Are you trying to arm yourself like a hedgehog? Doma reached out and affectionately pinched Inosuke's cheek. As for real fans, Dad happens to have a pair of fans made of polar iron in his storeroom. They were made by a craftsman 200 years ago to please me. Its hardness is comparable to a Nicaran blade. I'll give it to you as a 7th birthday present. As for the second knife. Doma's gaze suddenly turned towards the direction of the Paradise Cult's gate, and the smile on his lips turned somewhat cruel. Perfect timing, someone delivered it to your door today. Go pick it up yourself. The Eternal Bliss Sect, front gate. Amidst the wind and snow, a man wearing a straw raincoat and with a knife at his waist was trudging along with difficulty. His name is Murata, a gang-rank swordsman in the Demon Slayer Corps. Although his rank is not high, he is cautious, tough, and lucky. This time, he received orders from the Crow, saying that several young girls had gone missing in the area, suspected to be related to a cult called the Eternal Bliss Cult, and that he should investigate. This place is eerily cold. Murata tightened his team uniform, exhaled a breath, and his hand remained firmly on the hilt of his sword. For some reason, the closer he got to that magnificent temple, the stronger his unease became. Just as he was about to step onto the last stone step, a white figure suddenly appeared on the Torii gate. He was a boy who looked only 7 or 8 years old. He was dressed in a gorgeous blue and white brocade outfit, but his face carried an air of nobility that was inconsistent with his age. Most strikingly, the boy had a tatami sword with a broken scabbard hanging on his left waist, while 2 iron fans gleaming with a bluish light were clipped to his right. "Hey, you in black!" The boy looked down at the fields from his high vantage point, his voice clear yet carrying an undeniable arrogance. "This is private property. If you're carrying weapons and want to go in, you'll have to leave your knife behind." Murata paused, then frowned. "Little brother, I am a traveler passing through. This knife is for self-defense and must not be out of my sight. Please move aside." Protection. At this moment, Inosuke is standing on the Torii gate, his innate, extraordinary sense of touch fully activated. In the wind and snow, he could clearly sense the aura emanating from the man before him. It wasn't strong. In fact, one could even say it was somewhat weak. But the knife at his waist. Inosuke's gaze locked onto the Nichiren blade at Murata's waist. It was an indigo blue blade, its color deep and subtly gleaming with a cold light. "Good knife. It's much better than the broken sword that Doma gave me. I've got my eye on it." Inosuke grinned, revealing 2 sharp little fangs. "I've taken a liking to your knife. In exchange, I can spare your legs and just throw you down the mountain." "What?" Before Murata could react, he saw the boy leap down from the Torii gate like a snake catching hawk. "No more nonsense, let's get started." As Inosuke hurtled through the air, his right hand swiftly drew out the serrated knife wrapped in spider silk, while his left hand smoothly pulled out a blue iron fan from his waist. Ice-breathing first form windmill fan modification. The iron fan in his left hand was swung out instantly, not directly attacking Murata, but using the extreme speed brought by the agility enhancement to create a strange vortex in the air. The snow on the ground was swept up by the cyclone, instantly forming a white snow curtain that obscured Murata's view. "Is that blood demon art?" Murata exclaimed in shock, instinctively drawing his sword and swinging it to try and disperse the snow curtain. However, just as he swung his sword, an even sharper and more ferocious whistling sound pierced through the snow. That's the serrated knife in Inosuke's right hand. When a loud crash, Murata felt a violent jolt in his wrist, and his hand went numb. To his horror, he discovered that his Nichiren blade was being firmly jammed by his opponent's nicked and broken sword. "Got you!" Inosuke's face pierced through the snow, inches away. He used the serrated edge to catch the opponent's blade, his core strength suddenly erupting, and his waist twisted in the process. "Let go of me!" A strange force came from Murata's hand, and he couldn't hold the hilt at all. The Nichiren blade flew straight out of his hand and stuck in the snow next to him. The battle ended faster than expected. In a single encounter, the Demon Slayer Corps swordsman was disarmed. Inosuke didn't give chase. Instead, like a squirrel that had spotted a pine cone, he ran over quickly and drew his indigo blue Nichiren blade. "Great knife! What a great knife! Hee hee!" Inosuke held the sword, swinging it a couple of times with obvious delight. The sword had an excellent center of gravity and a smooth feel, it was practically made for dual wielding. Murata slumped to the ground, completely dumbfounded as he watched the boy excitedly waving his sword around. What kind of monster was this? That fan-wielding snow-swirling technique, that terrifying strength, was this really human? Hey! Inosuke suddenly turned around and looked at Murata. He held the newly stolen indigo katana in his left hand and his original serrated sword in his right, his expression somewhat conflicted. Asymmetrical. Inosuke frowned. One is smooth, the other is serrated. That makes chopping feel different. Under Murata's horrified gaze, Inosuke, carrying Murata's brand new, treasured Nichiren blade, walked towards a large blue stone nearby. What are you doing? That's a Nichiren blade. It's very valuable. Murata couldn't help but shout. I know. Inosuke raised the knife, pointed it at the stone, and gave a smile that was hard to decipher. It's precisely because it's precious that I want to shape it into what I like. Clang! 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 A crisp metallic clang echoed through the mountain gate, sparks flying everywhere. Murata felt as if each hammer blow was hitting his heart. He watched helplessly as his beloved knife, meticulously maintained to the finest condition, was brutally damaged by the boy, chipping away at its edges until it became exactly like the other knife. Serrated blade. Call. Inosuke blew the stone chips off the blades with satisfaction and crossed the two serrated knives in front of him. The serrated teeth meshed together, gleaming coldly. That's right. Inosuke put the two swords back into his waistband, one on the left and one on his back, and then tucked the pair of blue iron fans into his chest pocket. Dual swords are for offense, while the iron fan is for defense. It is perfect in both appearance and practicality. This is the kind of presence the young master of the Eternal Bliss sect should have. Inosuke walked up to Murata, who was completely dumbfounded, and looked down at him condescendingly. Your knife is mine now. Inosuke pulled a gold plate from his pocket and casually tossed it at Murata. This is the money for the sword. Also, go back and tell the Demon Slayer Corps that this area is under the protection of young Master Honorable. If you want to investigate, send someone capable. As for lucky newbies like you, I'll take as many as come. After saying that, Inosuke ignored Murata's reaction and turned to run up the mountain. Dad! Look! I've collected them all. I can use dual swords now. The boy's voice disappeared into the wind and snow. Murata clutched the warm gold plate, staring at the empty scabbard stuck in the snow, tears welling in his eyes. The air seemed even colder now. What does that mean? Did he die before achieving his goal? Was he robbed by a 7-year-old child? This is so unlucky, ugh. The rear hall. Doma looked at his son's new outfit and nodded in satisfaction. Not bad, really not bad. Doma picked up the indigo blue Nichiren blade that had been smashed beyond recognition, his fingers gently tracing the serrated edges. Although it destroyed the original structure, it also gave it new life. Inosuke, you're such a little artist. That's... Inosuke said smugly, toying with the pair of iron fans. These fans are much heavier than the previous imitations, with blade-like ribs and fine barbs along the edges when unfolded. Combined with his ice spirit physique, they generate a low-temperature effect when wielded. Father, let me give this fan a name too. Inosuke suddenly unfolded the iron fan, covering half of his face, revealing only a pair of cunning eyes. How about we name them Swallowing Clouds and Spitting Mist? Your taste is a bit outdated. Doma retorted without hesitation, however, since it's what you like, then so be it. Doma stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the snow falling heavier and heavier outside. Weapons are in place, and techniques are taking shape. Inosuke, for the next few years, you only need to do one thing. Doma turned around, his 7-colored eyes becoming unusually serious. Take this incongruous fighting style and make it completely instinctive. Because, according to Lord Muzan's information. Doma's voice lowered. The Demon Slayer Corps' leader seems to have sensed something. Perhaps it won't be long before the true pillars. They'll come knocking on your door. Inosuke gripped the hilts of his twin swords tightly, feeling a firm, sticky sensation from the spider silk in his palms. Come on then. Perfect timing, my knife isn't sharp enough, I need a whetstone. 7-year-old Inosuke stands in a palace filled with ice lotus flowers. He holds a fan in his left hand and a knife in his right. Chapter 13. Time flies, 6 years have passed since Inosuke last saw Murata. Inosuke is now 13 years old, a time of rapid growth and development, with a tall and straight figure. That face inherited all of Qin best features. It was so beautiful that the female believers in the church dared not look directly at it, and a single glance would evoke wonderful fantasies. But the moment he opens his mouth, that beautiful filter shatters into nothingness. His mouth was completely warped by Doma. To put it simply, he has a very sharp tongue. Blissful religion. Boss Takahashi. Inosuke sat cross-legged on the throne belonging to Doma, the head priest. He toyed with 2 gold coins in his hand, making a crisp clinking sound. Behind him was a screen painted with images of hell. Kneeling before him was a portly middle-aged man. This is the largest rice merchant in town, the owner of Takahashiya. Young master. Takahashi wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. This year's harvest is indeed poor, I could only raise the rice price by a small margin of 10%. Before Takahashi could even finish speaking. 1/10. Inosuke's lips curled into a smile. He sensed the faint tremor in Takahashi's body caused by lying. Sato. Inosuke called out lazily. The butler, Sato, immediately opened the ledger and read it aloud expressionlessly. Takahashi rice shop hoarded 5,000 koku of old rice and secretly colluded with Ronin to block the grain supply, causing the price of rice in the town to triple. Profit last month, 300 taels of gold. Takahashi's face turned deathly pale instantly. I'm innocent, young master. My men did it behind my back. All right, stop acting. Inosuke waved his hand impatiently, grabbed an apple from the table, and took a bite. A chilling killing intent instantly enveloped Takahashi. That was Inosuke imitating the sense of oppression that Doma had honed over many years. It is also a required course for the young master of the blissful sect. No. Don't kill me. I'll pay. I'll atone for my sins. Takahashi was terrified and frantically kowtowed. That's right. Inosuke smiled and held up 3 fingers. 500 taels of gold, as compensation for the spiritual damage suffered by the religious community. In addition, we will distribute porridge to the slums west of town for 3 months. If I find out there's sand in the porridge, I'll chop you up and mix you in to feed the pigs. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for sparing my life, young master. Watching Takahashi scramble away, Inosuke stretched. Sato, put these 500 taels in the charity fund's account. I'll give 300 taels to my father and mother to buy some clothes. I have 200 taels left for myself. Yes, young master. Sato looked at his young master with eyes full of admiration. In recent years, under the young master's leadership, although the reputation of the blissful sect remains mysterious, the surrounding area has been surprisingly safe. Because, all the bullies were outmaneuvered and betrayed by the young master. The young master is the most powerful. Sato looked at the boy whose demeanor was increasingly resembling that of a cult leader, and nodded in agreement like a chick pecking at rice. After finishing his official duties, Inosuke felt utterly bored. Doma's perverted father has been clinging to mom lately, almost to the point of being inseparable from her, and they spend all their time hiding in the back hall and refusing to come out. Let's go down the mountain and take a walk. Inosuke touched the twin swords at his waist. Town at the foot of the mountain. Inosuke was dressed in a striking outfit, with 2 exaggeratedly designed swords strapped to his waist. He swaggered down the street, and passers-by gave him a wide berth. Wah-ah-ah. Help! I don't want to die. I don't want to be disemboweled. Inosuke frowned. That familiar voice, is it that crybaby again? He followed the sound and saw a blonde boy clinging tightly to a girl's leg in front of a dumpling shop, crying with snot and tears streaming down his face. Don't abandon me. I've even taken out high-interest loans because of you. If you ever abandon me after taking advantage of me, I'll kill myself. Wah-ya-ya. The girl looked disgusted. Are you crazy? I don't even know you. Let go. Zenitsuo Agatsuma was 13 years old. This guy, years have passed, and instead of improving, he's gotten even worse. It's so noisy. Inosuke stepped forward, and without saying a word, kicked Zenitsuo in the butt. Ouch! Zenitsuo screamed and flew through the air, rolling several times on the snow before coming to a stop. He jumped up, clutching his backside, and roared through teary eyes. Who kicked me? Are the debt collectors here? When he saw who was standing in front of him, his voice stopped abruptly. The boy was even more beautiful than a girl, but a fierce glint shone in his emerald green eyes. What's most terrifying is the pair of swords at his waist. He looks like a tough guy. Who are you? Who are you? Zenitsuo trembled with fear and instinctively hid behind the girl. I am your creditor. Inosuke crossed his arms, his face full of mockery. You just disturbed my ears, pay up. Pay me back. Zenitsuo's tears are about to fall again. I have no money. I'm already drowning in debt. Since you're going to kill me, then give me a quick death. But please don't cut off my face, I want to be handsome again in my next life. Just as Zenitsuo was about to close his eyes and await death, a gentle yet firm voice broke through. Please wait a moment. A red-haired boy carrying a charcoal basket pushed his way out of the crowd and stood in front of Zenitsuo. He wore a black and green checkered haori, had a scar on his forehead, and clear eyes. Komato Tanjiro. Young master. Tanjiro looked at Inosuke, his nose twitched, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. Is it you? He recognized him. Although several years have passed, the boy's height and demeanor have changed. But Tanjiro will never forget that unique flavor. That was the kind person who gave him a gold coin when he was in his most difficult time. Hey, charcoal seller. Inosuke looked at Tanjiro, a smile playing on his lips. It's been years, and you still look the same. That. Tanjiro scratched his head somewhat embarrassedly. Thank you for the money back then. Thanks to it, I was able to buy new winter clothes for my younger siblings. I'll pay you back slowly. Pay back the money. Inosuke scoffed. I never take back the money I give out, however. He pointed to Zenitsuo, who was hiding behind Tanjiro. This blonde guy is giving me a headache. Since you want to repay my kindness, then have a cup of tea with me, and bring this good-for-nothing along. A moment later, the three arrived at the town's most upscale tea house. Inosuke booked the best private room, and the table was laden with snacks and expensive tea. 3 people sat around a table, the atmosphere strange. Inosuke sat there with an air of superiority, like a mountain king. Tanjiro sat upright, looking very reserved. Zenitsuo huddled in a corner, stuffing dumplings into his mouth while constantly glancing at Inosuke's sword, trembling all over. You mean, your name is Hashabira Inosuke? Tanjiro, holding his teacup, said sincerely. What a great name! My name is Komato Tanjiro, and this blonde guy is Agatsuma Zenitsuo. Who cares what you're called? Inosuke picked up a piece of pastry and threw it into his mouth. I'm in a good mood today, so I'll treat you all to a good meal. After you finish eating, you'll all be